Hi everyone, and welcome back to another of my 30 before 30 videos. Today we are going to have a very tattoo themed day. I'm uploading two different videos, both of which are about tattoos in general, but this first video is actually a little tattoo tour. Now, I've talked about my tattoos previously on the podcast, so forgive me if you've seen this all before, but to be honest, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the experience of each of my tattoos, a little bit about what they mean to me, whether they mean anything, and yeah, just going a little bit more in depth, which I haven't actually done before. So even if you have heard me talk about my tattoos on the podcast, this is going to be at least partially new information. I currently have 5 different tattoos, and I love each and every one of them. Every one of my tattoos is very special to me. I have not yet reached a point where I think this is too many tattoos. I don't really know if I'll ever reach a point where I think I have too many tattoos. But yeah, let's just get started in terms of telling you about my tattoo journey. I must admit, for my first ever tattoo, I did spend an incredibly long time thinking about the placement, thinking about the design. It was very specific. I had been dreaming about the design, I think, for about 2 years before I actually got it done. So it took a long time for it to be able to solidify in my mind, because I wanted to make sure that I was getting something that I knew that I would love forever and something that meant a lot to me. And for me, taking that first step into being a more tattooed person, it needed to have more significance than just, I kind of like that design, just stick it on my body. So my first tattoo was done by an incredible artist called Amy Savage, and it was done at a studio called Jane Doe Tattoo in Essex. I had to travel a fair way. We drove there in the car to get there, but it was well worth it to get this piece. The piece that I have is on my upper thigh. The design has a robin surrounded by forget-me-nots, and the robin is actually holding a locket with the initials SH on it, and it was everything that I'd wanted and more in terms of the design. I absolutely loved it. I can't remember the exact age that I was when I first got this tattoo. I believe I was around about 24 years old when I got this done, but don't quote me on that because my perception of time is really quite terrible. It was a very personal piece to me then, and it will be forever. Every single part of this tattoo represents something special to me. Each one of the key elements represents an important person in my life. So the robin is for my dad, the forget-me-not flowers are for my mum, and the locket with SH, it stands for sweetheart, and that is for Emrys. So to me, every single one of those things have a lot of meaning, but to other people that look at it, it just looks like a cute little robin with a locket in its mouth. So, you know, it's all good. It was done in one sitting. It took maybe around about 2 hours to complete, and I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, pain-wise, it was probably coming in at about a 4. One thing that I would say about this tattoo, it is going to need touching up at some point in the future. It's not something that is on my to-do list for right here, right now, but some of the ink has fallen out, and that's happened for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was the first tattoo I ever had, and therefore in terms of healing it, I didn't have a set process as to how I heal my tattoos, and that meant that some of the scabbing fell off more quickly than it should, taking the ink with it. So that happened initially right after it finished healing. Also, because it's on the kind of more fleshy part of my upper leg, I have experienced kind of changes in my weight over the many years since I had this tattoo done, which means that I have developed some stretch marks on that part of my leg. That has caused a little bit of discoloration in certain parts of the tattoo. To be honest, it's probably not noticeable to anybody other than myself, but I would like to give it a little bit of love and just inject a little bit more life into it at a later date. But for now, I still absolutely love it, and like I said, it's probably just because I am a perfectionist rather than anything. My second tattoo came a couple of years after the first one. I'd kind of sated my need for a tattoo, but this one is, I think, my favourite of all of the tattoos I currently have, although I love them all in their own little way. This one was specifically for our engagement. So I got this tattoo between getting engaged to Emrys and our wedding, so it fell directly between. And I really wanted something to remember that point in our lives together because it was just amazing. And that whole process of planning the wedding, though stressful, was really, really wonderful. And plus, at this point, I was kind of thinking any excuse to get a little bit of extra ink because I already felt like a bit of an addict, which I still very much am. My second piece was done by an incredible artist called Cassandra Francis. She is wonderful. I followed her on Instagram, as I did Amy Savage, a long time before I booked an appointment with her. But Cassandra had been working in other places in the UK, and then I heard that she was moving to London, and I contacted her as soon as I found out that she was going to be in London, and I booked an appointment with her pretty much as soon as I knew that she would be within decent travel distance for me to get to her, because she is, to this day, probably my favourite tattoo artist who is currently out there working. I just think everything that she does is stunning. The tattoo parlour that I went to was Black Garden Tattoo, and that is in London. It's kind of close to Holborn Station, within walking distance to Holborn, and this tattoo was completed over 2 different sessions. This is the only one of the tattoos that I have that wasn't completed in just one sitting, and that is because it is the largest piece that I have, and it's also the most intricate piece that I have. I would say that there's probably around about 7 hours of tattooing in this piece. For my first sitting, we did the line work for the entire piece, and the second sitting we did all of the shading and the colour work. This one is on my left thigh, on the front of my left thigh, and it is a Beauty and the Beast themed tattoo. It has Beauty and the Beast characters who are gorgeous, but my beast is not a kind of traditional beast. He is a bear, and they are both surrounded by beautiful roses. And I really, 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 really love this tattoo. But in terms of the meaning, I've always loved Beauty and the Beast. I am obsessed with everything to do with it, not just the Disney film. I love all of the retellings that have been told over the years in novel form. I love the original story, the fairy tale. I just love it. It's captivated me since I was a child, so having a tattoo of Beauty and the Beast really means a lot to me. The reason that the Beast is a bear is that Emrys and I kind of affectionately call each other Bear rather than referring to each other by our first names. So this really is a perfect representation for me of our engagement, of our relationship, whilst also being a really, really beautiful tattoo in its own merit. So, yay. Pain threshold wise, this is definitely the most painful tattoo that I have had so far. I would put it at around about an 8 or a 9 on the pain threshold. That isn't to say that the entire process was painful. It was certain parts of it that really were kind of unbearable. In particular, the hair of the lovely lady that I have tattooed there is a lot of line work very close together, and the memory that I have, although I can't really remember how painful it was, but I remember at the time feeling that it was as though someone had taken a cheese grater to my leg. It was very uncomfortable, and it was 2 relatively long sittings to get it looking the way that it does. So it's the amount of time that is spent on a piece that can just be very, very exhausting, and I was very, very worse for wear after getting this piece done. However, it is, like I said, my favourite, I think, of all of the pieces that I have, so it's 100% worth it as far as I was concerned. My third tattoo was one that I got on our honeymoon when we went to Edinburgh. I wanted a reminder and a permanent memento of our honeymoon and our wedding, and so I made sure that I sourced a really, really, really great artist before we headed off to Edinburgh. This tattoo was done by an artist called Just Jen at the Den of Iniquity in Edinburgh, and the reason that I knew about Jen is that a good friend of mine had got a couple of pieces done by her in the past when she had been performing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I also knew that Jen had done a lot of hand tattoos, so a lot of hands holding different objects, which is something that I really wanted for this particular piece. So I knew that she was very, very good at what I wanted. And so when I contacted her and explained the kind of idea that I had in mind, I knew that I could be confident that she would be able to produce a design that I really, really loved and that kind of encompassed all of the different elements that I wanted. This was a relatively quick tattoo. I think it was done maybe in about an hour and a half. I would say pain level was probably around about a 5. And yeah, it was just a very, very pleasant experience. It's on the fleshy, squishy side of my right thigh, and I really, really love it. The design is obviously a hand holding a heart with our initials in it, so an E and a K, and Jen did kind of sneakily say to me, I've designed it so that if you ever need to black over the initials at any point, it will still look really nice. And although that was kind of funny to hear when you were on your honeymoon, I really do appreciate that she took that into consideration. A lot of people don't like getting their other halves' names or anything like that tattooed on themselves, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't. I just have an initial, but that might even be a bit much for some people, but such is my commitment to my husband. Honestly, I would never get his name tattooed on me. I think it works within the piece, and as Jen rightly kind of designed it, if I ever wanted to get that blacked over, I could, and it wouldn't be a problem, but fingers crossed that will never happen. My fourth tattoo was one that was relatively recently. I got it done in New York this January just gone, when Emrys and I went to Vogue Knitting Live. Well, I went to Vogue Knitting Live and Emrys came to New York with me. We were on holiday and it was wonderful. That visit to New York was incredibly special for me because I was able to connect with so many people from the knitting community that I have never been able to see in real life, podcasters and viewers and creators, and it was magical. New York has such a special place in my heart. It has been one of the most magical places that I've ever been to in my entire life, and I absolutely love it. So I always knew that if I could get tattooed when I was there, it would be a really, really special, lovely thing, and I'm so happy that I did. As with the majority of people that I have been tattooed by, I found out about Zoe Bean on Instagram. I have been putting a lot of feelers out, doing a lot of research on Instagram, looking for New York tattoo artists who tattooed within a kind of style that I liked, who I thought would be nice to visit if I'd get the opportunity. And Zoe really, really was one of my top choices. I wasn't sure whether I would be able to get an appointment with her because by the time I ended up booking, it was only about a month before we were visiting. But when I got in touch with her, luckily she had some availability and I was able to go and visit her at Eight of Swords Tattoo Parlor, which is in Brooklyn, and it was an amazing experience. Again, it was done in one sitting. I think it was around about 2.5 hours, and it was a little bit time intensive because Zoe's technique is dot work. So once she had done the outlining on my tattoo, which is a ball of yarn with 2 little knitting needles through it, all of the shading that she did was in beautiful, intricate dot work, and it looks beautiful and I really, really love it. I love how this kind of technique looks, and it's quite different to every other piece that I currently have on my body. It's also the first time that I branched away from my thigh area, which is where I had always been tattooed previously, as this is down on my left ankle. Up until that point, pretty much every tattoo that I had was entirely hidden 24/7, and the only one who could appreciate it was me, or anyone who saw me in a kind of shorter skirt or shorts, which I don't really wear on a regular basis. In terms of pain, I would put this tattoo at about a 6 out of 10. And that again is not to say that the entire process was painful. The dot work after a certain amount of time, it did get a little bit grueling, just because like the hair in my thigh tattoo, my piece by Cassandra Francis, it's a lot of work in a small space, which basically means that your body is getting a lot of kind of trauma in just one small area, which is always going to be more uncomfortable than if that's spread over a larger space. I absolutely love this design. I think it's perfect for that time in my life to represent that knitting has taken me to some incredible places and helped me meet some wonderful people, and for that I will always be very, very happy that I have it. The only downside of this tattoo is that it is the most generic of all of the tattoos that I have ever gotten. All of my others are very, very personalized to kind of a very specific extreme, and because this is one of the tattoos that is more generic, it has fallen prey to people copying it, insofar as I have seen people almost do a copy and paste of this exact design onto their own bodies, which means that there are some people out there with my specific design down to how the yarn crosses in the yarn ball on their bodies, because they couldn't be bothered to kind of imagine something unique for themselves. And that is frustrating, because it may be a slightly generic image, but it is something that was designed specifically for me, and it's quite unique in itself in the way that it's put together. People who copy other people's tattoos, I just think, what's the point? The only thing that makes me happy in that instance is that I know that the job that Zoe did on my tattoo is going to be better than pretty much anybody else with that same design, so I can feel confident in that. My final and most recent tattoo is the first ever tattoo that took me away from the leg region and moved on to a different part of my body, because it's on my arm and I absolutely love it. This tattoo was done by the incredible Vicky Morgan, and I would say of all my tattooing experiences, the one that I had with Vicky is by far and away the absolute best. She is wonderful, she is funny, and I already have plans in the back of my head to go back to her and get many, many more pieces, just because she was an absolute joy to sit with for a couple of hours and get this piece done. The other reason that I wanted to get a piece from Vicky is that she specialises in pet portraiture. She also does a lot of Disney inspired tattoos, and those are incredible. She does a lot of Harry Potter inspired tattoos, which is really what drew me to her, and I think I found her because I was going through Instagram, again from Instagram, because all of the artists that I've been tattooed by were pretty much found through Instagram. I saw a lot of her Harry Potter flash that she did a little while ago, and she'd been in the back of my mind for a Harry Potter tattoo possibly. When I saw that she was doing pet portraits, I knew that she was the only person that I wanted to do my own personal pet portrait, which is obviously of Rolly. I travelled to Nottingham to get this tattoo done by Vicky to Bodycraft Tattoo, which was a really, really nice place to be. It was actually relatively easy to get to, even though I had to drive for quite a long time. I would say I have travelled further for tattoos. Obviously, I've been to Edinburgh and I've been to New York and been tattooed, but this is the furthest that I've ever travelled specifically just to get tattooed, but it was 100% worth it, and I would do it again in a second. This tattoo is obviously a portrait of Rolly, and I love it. I love how moody he looks in it. I love how kind of frog-faced and weird he looks, because that's what he looks like in real life, and it was, like I said, a real pleasure to get done. I would put it at about a 3 on the pain threshold, about 3 out of 10. It is on my inner arm, on my lower arm on the left-hand side, and it's on a nice kind of squishy piece of flesh, so there's very little to get irritated by having a tattoo there. It's a very, very nice place to get tattooed, quite a pleasant experience, in fact, once you've got over the initial discomfort of, oh yes, there's a buzzing needle on my skin. It was done in one sitting, and basically it took the length of the film Moana to get done, because we put that film on whilst I was getting tattooed, and we watched it and we sang along and we had a wonderful time and talked about Disney World, and you can tell I had a great time with Vicky. She was awesome. And in terms of healing, this is definitely the most successful tattoo that I've ever had. Vicky used a very specific kind of wrap on my tattoo that I've never used before. It's actually a kind of surgical seal kind of sticky stuff that just sticks to skin. It doesn't stick to the tattoo, which meant the tattoo could breathe. It also didn't leak at all, which was wonderful. And Vicky pointed me in the direction of using coconut oil as a healing agent for my tattoo. So of all of my tattoos that I've got, I definitely think that my Rolly tattoo is still the most vibrant, still looks the freshest, and that's not just because of its age. It's healed beautifully, so from now onwards I will only ever use coconut oil in the healing of my tattoos. So there you have it, guys. That is my little tattoo tour. Like I said, there will be another video after this one which is answering a lot of tattoo based questions, some of which were sent to me on Instagram, so I will, once that's uploaded, put a link to that in the description to this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of kind of tattoo talk, and I will see you again really soon. Bye!